ahead and do my spiel. All right, today this is an interview in the case of State versus Paula Marie Huff. Today is Friday, August 2nd. It's approximately 11:08. Case number is 2013-0470. We are in the first floor conference room of the Pima County Attorney's Office. Present are myself, Colleen Taney, I'm the assigned prosecutor. We have Ms. Paula Huff, who's representing herself. We have Detective Josh Cheek, and we also have Detective Ed Salgado, who works with our office. He's here as a witness. So with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to Ms. Huff.
Okay. All right, let's see. Do you have any opening statements?
Do I have any opening statements?
Mm-hmm.
You mean as far as, are you asking like where I work or with whom I'm employed, or?
No, just if you have any statements before we begin.
No.
Okay. Let's see. Have you ever deliberately made a false statement under oath?
No.
Have you ever been dismissed, suspended, or disqualified from a case, or had a case go to appeals or get dismissed, including on appeals, due to a false statement made by you?
There were a lot of parts to that question. Let me see if I can answer that. I've never been suspended or received any discipline for making any false statements, and I've never had any cases overturned on appeal for making false statements.
Have you ever had any cases go to appeals because of false statements?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Let's see, make sure I got all this. Disclosed my case, had a case go to appeals or get dismissed, including on appeals. Okay, we covered it all. Okay. I'm asking these questions of everybody just so you know. Who was the officer in charge of my case? Was it you?
No, that was Detective Diaz.
Okay. And have you received any training in Title 36, Section 28, the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act?
I've received training in reference to the Medical Marijuana Act. The training that I've received has come in the form of conversations that I've had with members of the Tucson Police Department legal advisors. The training consists of conversations that I've had with members of the Pima County Attorney's Office, members of the Arizona Department of Health Services, members of the Attorney General's Office, and members of the private law firm that's been contracted by the Attorney General's Office to represent the state in card revocation hearings. That's some of the training that I've received in reference to that.
Okay, and when did you receive this training?
Shortly after the law went into effect, and throughout, and at various different points in time after that law went into effect.
Okay. When did the law go into effect?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
About the time you started training for it, or with it, or I was just wondering when your training began in relation to when the law went into effect. Was it?
I don't remember if they started as the law was coming about, or if they put something out at the same point in time. But around that period of time is when I started receiving training and having conversations with these people about the law and how it works.
Okay, and do you remember what year that was?
No, like I said, I don't remember off the top of my head.
All right, do you remember what form it was given in? Like, did you watch a movie? Were you sitting around a round table with people? How was your training given? Did you have just have telephone conversations? Was it, because you'd mentioned conversations, I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
I think the vast majority of the training that I've had has been either through face-to-face conversations with those various different agencies and individuals working for those agencies, and telephone conversations with people associated with those agencies. It's possible that there may have been some printed material as well, but I can't remember when that may have been released. I think the legal advisor's office has some printed materials in regards to that. But aside from that, like I said, the vast majority of the training that I've received in reference to that law has been through conversations, both face-to-face and phone conversations with various different people from those agencies that I mentioned.
Okay. And let's see, so were you tested or certified anyway in the new laws and the way the laws changed, or?
I don't think we received any kind of, I don't think we took any kind of test in relation to the law, and As far as certification, I'm not aware of any certification for law enforcement in relation to this law.
Okay, so you had these conversations, but they never verified that you understood the information, right?
Well, that would be a question for the people who were relaying that information to me. If you're asking if I understood the information that they were relaying, yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sure you did. I was just wondering if they tested that, if they tested your knowledge.
I didn't take any tests, no.
Okay. And let's see, I had a question that just popped into my head. It was about the, has your job description or your proceedings and your policies and procedures changed in any way, shape, or form since the Medical Marijuana Act was passed? Or do you do the exact same thing you always did? Has anything changed in relation to your job since the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act was passed?
Well, specifically in relation to that act and to marijuana-related crimes, sure. I mean, previous to that act being passed, if we went out to investigate a marijuana grow, that marijuana grow was illegal, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the grow. And once that act, or if somebody possessed a quantity of marijuana, that was illegal as well. However, once that law was passed, obviously we had different responsibilities. We had to make different determinations to determine whether somebody had a medical marijuana card that legally allowed them to possess the marijuana that they were possessing, or whether somebody had a medical marijuana card that allowed them to grow the marijuana that was being grown. So in that sense, I guess you could say that our responsibilities changed after this law was passed.
Okay. Do you know what you're supposed to do when somebody shows you a valid medical marijuana card? Or when they show you a card that's got a valid expiration date and that hologram and all that stuff on there? Have they told you what to do in that case when somebody presents one to you?
Sure, I can tell you what we do is if we're throughout the course of an investigation, if we receive a medical marijuana card from an individual, we will conduct a records query on the number that's on that card, and that's typically done through a phone call to our records people, and they will submit a query and they will give us a determination as to yes, this is a valid medical marijuana card, or no, this is not a valid medical marijuana card. Additionally, like you said, there are expiration dates on there, so we're able to visually see whether the card itself is expired or not.
Okay, do you make any kind of a recording of the person reading the number out loud? So later on, like let's say the cops come back and tell the person that their valid medical marijuana card came back, no record found or something like that, then is there something in place there that says, is there like a standard operating procedure for that? If it comes back invalid, for instance, is it automatically deemed that, or if it comes back no record found, is it automatically deemed invalid?
Okay, a lot of parts to that question. I will tell you that my practice is I don't record my conversation with the records department when I call to conduct those queries. I can tell you what my practice is. If I read a card number and that card number, they submit their query and they indicate that that's not a valid card, I will reread that number to verify that I haven't misread something.
Okay, does anybody ever check, because you're using your eyes to look at the card, and so let's say you see a 1 and it may look like a 7 to you, or it may look like an L, and so you're reading it the same way both times, but you may be reading it incorrectly. Is there any, so you guys never make any kind of a recording to verify that? So that you don't wind up with somebody like me across the table from you when you should be out doing your job?
That would be a question for, by individual person. What I can tell you is that I haven't made recordings of my conversations with the records personnel.
Okay, there's no standard operating procedure for that then?
Excuse me?
There's like no standard operating procedure for that then that you're telling me?
No, what I've told you, what I'm What I'm telling you is that is the standard operating procedure, is to conduct that query by contacting the records department personnel and read that card number to them, have them conduct the check, and have them relay that information to us. That's the procedure.
Okay, and my next question is just to clarify, because I'm kind of confused as to what went on in my case. Because I've heard from all of you guys that either you radio TWX or they call them on the phone for checking with Arizona DHS. Well, then they're going to have to call Arizona DHS, and then they're going to get back to you. So can you tell me how that happens? I mean, do you call in on the phone and they say, okay, we're going to call you back, and they call you back, or do they say we're going to radio you back? Do you radio it in? And, do you know what I mean? Like, because there's a gap there between when you give them the card number and then when they get on the horn and they call DHS and they tell them that number. See what I mean? It's like a game of telephone, because you're looking at it and reading it, then they're writing it down, then they're calling DHS and reading this card to them, and then they get a thing back saying it's whatever it comes back. Let's say it comes back no record found. Well, then do they call you? Do they radio you? What do they do at that point? How do you find out once you have called the card in and then they're calling DHS? How are you contacted after that? And
Okay.
because I'm kind of confused. I don't know what happened with my card.
Okay. So to try to answer that question, again, what my practice is I'll make a phone call to the records folks or the TWX folks, and I will relay to them, yes, I need the status of a medical marijuana card checked. I will read that card off to that individual. While I'm on the phone with that individual, it's been my experience that individual will conduct a query. And again, this would be a question for those personnel, but I believe it's, my understanding is that it's a computer query. And the results of that query come back to them. They relay that information to me right there over the phone. And again, it's been my practice in the past, if we run into a situation where a card number they're indicating is not a valid card, I will have them right there on the phone so that I can reread the number to them to make sure that we're both looking at the same number, to make sure there isn't a discrepancy either on my end or on their end.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking this is because I used to drive a Hyundai, and my insurance, I had to switch insurance companies at one point because they had, when I'd read the VIN number over the phone, it was an H that I had read, and they had put an 8. When they heard me, they put an 8. And it was such a hair puller, and trying to get them to change that 8 to an H so that it would be proper, because it was an H for Hyundai. And it was impossible. It was like pulling teeth, and finally I had to switch insurance companies. And so I was wondering in this instance, because I'm kind of suspecting that perhaps a number was either misread or misheard over the phone. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Okay.
And so I wanted to clarify the whole procedure of how this happens, so I could perhaps make heads or tails out of it, was all.
Okay.
Okay, now I'll move on to another set of questions. There's something a little different. And as far as your understanding, what is usable marijuana? Is it the whole plant? Is it certain parts of the plant?
Usable marijuana, in my understanding, is parts of the marijuana plant that contains THC or tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the chemical that makes marijuana. And so usable marijuana, again, by my understanding, would include the buds or flowers of the plant. It would include the leaves of the plant. It would not include the stalks of the plant, but it would include both the buds, the flowers, and the leaves of the plant.
Josh, you get a gold star next to your name. You're the only one that's answered that question correctly so far. Just so you know. Okay, what is a 2811 shield?
What is a 2811 shield?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question.
No idea. I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer.
No, I don't know what a 2811 shield is.
Okay. It's Title 36, Section 28, Chapter 11 is what the 2811 shield is. But it's okay. And do you know what a PowerPoint is?
like a PowerPoint presentation, where people will put a PowerPoint presentation on a computer and show that over. Sure.
Okay. Let's see. How long have you been participating in knock and talks like the one that took place at my house on January 10th of this year?
I have been doing knock and talks. I've worked for the Tucson Police Department for over 14 years. I've been doing knock and talks throughout the duration of my time with the department. I worked for the first 5 years, or a little over 5 years, in a patrol capacity in Operations Division South. And during that time, I had an opportunity to conduct knock and talks. I received specialized training in regards to knock and talks and search warrants investigations very early on, both at the Southern Arizona Law Enforcement Training Center at the academy where I received police training, but also specialized training after that. After my time working in patrol, I worked in the surveillance unit for about 1.5 years, and again, several times during the course of that period of my career, I had an opportunity to do knock and talks. After that, I was promoted to the rank of detective, and I worked in the auto theft unit as a detective for 1 year. Working in auto theft, we also conducted knock and talks, although not narcotic related, but we conducted knock and talks during that year. And then in September 2007, I was transferred to the Counter Narcotics Alliance, where I currently work as a detective. And throughout my entire time with the Narcotics Alliance, working as an investigator, I've conducted a large number of knock and talks.
Okay. Do you normally record your knock and talks?
Yes.
Did you record the knock and talk that you participated in at my house?
I didn't. I believe Detective Diaz did, but I didn't.
Okay. What was different about my house that made you not record your audio of it?
Okay, so let me clarify that, because you asked if we normally record our knock and talks. What we will do is, if we conduct a knock and talk, one of the individuals who's there and conducting the knock and talk records that. And so whether that's me or whether that's the other detective who's there with me, somebody will record that conversation, that knock and talk.
Okay. How many knock and talks on medical marijuana card holders do you conduct per month on average, would you say? This can be a rough estimate.
Yeah, I don't know that I can give you. I don't know that I can give you a number on that. We have that particular area has the medical marijuana and marijuana grows in relation to that. That's given us a lot of work since that law went into effect. In other words, patrol has called us out on a number of occasions in reference to those types of investigations. We've done a large number of knock and talks in relation to medical marijuana cards and marijuana grows since that law went into effect. I can't give you a specific number, though. I wouldn't be able to estimate.
Okay, let's see. I found out you were Officer of the Year in 2005. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I was named Officer of the Year in 2005.
Okay. And you had cited your prowess at cultivating personal informants as a major reason for your success. I'd like to hear a little bit about that, if you don't mind indulging me.
So I'm going to step in here, and again, this just goes back to stuff that we talked about with the first interview. I'm going to instruct the officer not to answer any questions regarding anything other than generalities. So I'm perfectly fine with him talking about how he uses informants or when he discusses them, but I'm instructing the officer not to go into any specific cases, any specific procedures, that sort of thing. If it's something that you'd like, you're absolutely free to file a motion on it, and if the judge orders it, the officer is more than willing to answer that question.
Relax, Colleen. It's just a question on my list.
We're on. I have to make sure the record's clear.
Okay, that's cool.
I get paid by the word.
All right. I was going to go, you don't have to explain. It's like, okay, cool, I'm good with that. All right. Given that my medical marijuana card was not expired and then it had a UV security image and clear laminate hologram on it, why would you tell me that it came back as no record found? Why would you tell me that makes it technically not valid?
Well, let me see if I can answer that. There are several things that we look at when if we're presented with a medical marijuana card in order to determine whether or not that's a valid card. One of the things we'll look at is the appearance of the card, to include that hologram and an expiration date, as well as the name and the photo on the card. Another thing that we will look at is and again, this is procedure. If we're presented with that card, we will run that number that is printed on that card, to verify whether or not that is a valid card, because there are people, not just with those cards, but with state ID cards, with various other different forms of identification and various different cards that will produce fictitious cards. And so that's part of our procedure, not only looking at the appearance of the card and all the information that's on it, but then verifying that based on that number that's assigned to that specific card.
Okay, and then what criteria do you use to designate a card that comes back no record found as technically not valid? And is there such a thing as technically valid?
Well, the criteria that we use is when we make that phone call to the records personnel, we'll make that query, we'll ask them to make that query on that number, and they will make that query and they will tell us, okay, yes, that card comes back as a valid card and it expires on such and such a date. Or they will come back and say, all right, this is that returns to an expired card, or they will come back and say that card that comes back is not valid. That number is coming back as not valid.
Did they ever tell you there's no record found of it?
I've had them tell me, I think the verbiage they use is not valid, by my recollection. That would probably be a better question for records personnel who conduct those queries regularly, but I think that's the terminology that they've used with me.
Okay, let's see here. I got a transcript of the knock and talk here.
So Ms. Huff, when you show him specific pages, if you could just say which page you're
Okay.
or line number even, just to make it clear.
All right, this will be okay. This is going to be on, let's see, page 6, line number 4. You are listed as saying, it's right after I said that I can't go in the house to get my original paperwork because you guys will follow me in. You say, yeah, okay, well, so yeah, that changes things anyway. So here's what we're gonna need to do, okay? Because there's no record found on the card, okay, means that the card is technically not valid, okay? And that may be for a number of reasons. However, okay, I'm wondering why you had said that, because that there's no record found, so that makes the card technically not valid. And the reason why I ask that is because what you are telling me there is that if the Arizona Department of Health Services, if their hopefully secure database server is down for whatever reason, see, I work on servers, so I know about these things. If their server is down for whatever reason, and I'm telling you this from work experience here, any card called in will result in an arrest, according to what you state there. Because technically, it's going to come back as no record found, and according to you, that means technically it's not valid. And that's simply because their server is down. So if their server goes down, innocent people like myself get arrested, because they would all be coming back as no record found, up until somebody in their IT department over there got a support request for it via the website. You click on a report a problem thing, and that goes to their IT support. Okay? Is there any sort of procedure in place, as far as you know, to prevent that sort of disaster from happening again?
That would be a question for the folks at the Department of Health Services, specifically the folks that operate and manage that medical marijuana program.
Okay, so not as far as you know.
No, that would be a question for
That's a question for IT, and I realize that. I just didn't know if they had told you any kind of procedure in place for when that server is down, because it will be down sometimes. you know, I mean, we have a gigantic server with my place of employment, and it's down sometimes. And so that's why I'm wondering, what happens when that server goes down? Does that mean that every card you run during that time is going to result in an arrest? Because that would be crazy. And who informed you of the status of my medical marijuana card?
I believe it was Sergeant Froby.
Okay. And what was Sergeant Froby's exact wording when he described the status of my card? Was it invalid, not valid, valid, or no record found?
He said that it was not. It's kind of a multiple choice question there. He didn't tell me it was valid. I don't remember what the specific wording was, but what he communicated to me was that it came back as, the records query came back as not being a valid card.
Okay, he didn't tell you it was just no record found?
Again, I don't remember the exact wording, but
Okay.
but what he communicated to me was that based on that records query, it was not a valid card.
Okay. And let's see, as a law enforcement officer with the Counter Narcotics Alliance, is it your job to enforce medical marijuana laws, Title 36, Section 28?
Part of my job, working as a detective with the Counter Narcotics Alliance, is to enforce narcotics laws, Title 13. Now, the way, in reference to medical marijuana law, the way that's interpreted and the way that we work in regards to that specific law is that law, that medical marijuana law, for an individual with a valid medical marijuana card, that acts as kind of an umbrella, if you will, for
like
that.
A shield?
Well, hold on, let me finish. Shield, umbrella, maybe, but
Okay.
you can call it what you like, but it acts as kind of like an umbrella, okay? And it protects that individual from prosecution under Title 13 of marijuana laws in the event that that person is in compliance with that part of the medical marijuana law. And that means that the card has to be valid, it has to be a current card, it has to be to them, and they have to be complying with the various parts of that medical marijuana law. As soon as one of those things fails to happen, like if there is not a card, or if the card is expired, or if it's not a valid card, or if that individual is operating outside the rules that apply to the medical marijuana law that you referred to, as soon as that happens, that protection goes away, and that individual is subject to the same prosecution for violation of Title 13 narcotics laws or marijuana laws as anybody else would.
Okay, so do you check for compliance with Title 36, Section 28?
And again, we deal with Title 13. However, what I'm trying to say is that when we come across a situation where we're looking at medical marijuana card holder or holders, and that's part of our investigation, then what we are required to do is we're required to as part of our investigation, make a determination, is this individual complying with the various parts of the medical marijuana law as it stands? If that person is complying with that, if there's no indication that person is not complying, and if there's no indication that it's not a valid card, if everything is within compliance and we have valid cards and we have everything following under those guidelines, then we obviously don't enforce that criminal law. We have walked away from those cases previously. However, in the event that we have a situation like that and somebody is operating outside the rules governing the medical marijuana law, then we step in and we enforce that criminal law.
Okay, is it the same way with other violations under Arizona Department of Health Services? Like, let's say a restaurant is out of compliance for cleanliness. Do you raid the restaurant and do criminal charges against the owner?
I'm not aware of what criminal charges there would be in regards to cleanliness of a restaurant.
You know, like putting food too close to the trash can and things like that. I mean, like really gross stuff that might give people, you know, like E. coli or Ebola or something. And do you, I mean, that could be dangerous and deadly. Do you enforce that whenever they're out of code? Do you go in, when they're out of compliance, do you go in and and do law enforcement under Title 13 against them?
I've never had anything to do with restaurant inspections as part of my work with the police
Okay,
department.
because the Medical Marijuana Act is under Arizona Department of Health Services exactly like restaurants are, and that was the reason for my asking that question. And as a detective with the Counter Narcotics Alliance, are you normally dispatched to the homes of medical marijuana cardholders to check for compliance with Title 36, Section 28? For instance, let's say somebody calls from an anonymous payphone and won't identify themselves and says, my neighbor has a medical marijuana card, but she has 100 plants over there. Would you be dispatched to go and check for compliance with 3628 and count that person's plants, go into their home and count their plants?
I wouldn't be dispatched. If that were a call for service, then a call such as you're describing would likely be dispatched to a patrol officer who would go out and make that contact. Or there is the possibility that the communications department would contact the Counter Narcotics Alliance and indicate, hey, this is a report that we're receiving. And in that sense, whether we were responding to a call like that or information to that effect, that what you're describing there, what we would do is we would respond certainly not as compliance officers, but we would respond as criminal investigators, because again, what's being described is if somebody's operating outside that medical marijuana law.
Kind of like putting food too close to the trash in a restaurant. I understand.
Hold on, let me finish. If somebody's operating outside the rules as they exist as part of the medical marijuana law, then yes, if they're operating outside that, then it becomes a criminal investigation. We will go out and we'll conduct a criminal investigation. That's not to say that we go out and conduct inspections on houses, but we'll conduct a criminal investigation. And those criminal investigations can consist of knock-and-talks, they can consist of surveillance, they can consist of a number of different types of interviews, a number of different types of or forms of investigation to investigate that report.
Okay. Let's see, why was I not given a police blanket after you and Diaz pulled me out of my house?
Okay, well, let me try and answer that. If you're asking if anyone pulled you out of your house, the answer to that is no. If you're asking why weren't you given a police blanket, I can tell you that certainly if you had indicated that you were cold and then requested a blanket would have been given to you. But I don't know whether you requested one or not. After our initial contact, I moved away from the door and I had some other responsibilities.
Okay. I have on here that somewhere in your report you had said that you asked me to step outside. What was I wearing when you came to my house?
A towel.
Okay, and it says here that you had asked me to step outside and I did so. I was hoping you could show me on this transcript of the knock and talk where it was that you had asked me to step outside, because all I found when I was listening to the audio was scuffling sounds as you and Diaz pulled me out of my house. After Diaz had asked me to hand my card out the door, and the next thing I knew, both of you had hold of me and were pulling me out of my house. And I was just wondering if you could point there where it is that you asked me to step outside of my house.
Just while he's reviewing that, I pulled up on Westlaw,
Mm-hmm.
the Moreno case. Can you just double check and make sure I have the right one? I think I pulled it up before you sent me the link, and I haven't had a chance to double check, but it sounded like it was the same time
Yes.
period, and I did see officer names in there.
Yes,
That's
yes.
the correct one?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, what I can tell you is I'm looking on page 3 here, and I don't see scuffling sounds, the scuffling sounds that you're describing.
No, you hear them in the audio, actually. It's not something they would really put in a transcript.
Okay. What I see here is I see a conversation, the portion of the conversation with Detective Diaz, where he's asking you, it's page 3, line 24, where he says, "Great, thank you. I'm just going to stand right here, okay? I'm not trying to, I know that you're in a towel and everything, but," and then on line 26, you respond, "But no, I feel," and it says inaudible. And then line 28, it says they're going to verify that. I don't see on here anything as far as a request to step outside.
How'd I get out of my house then in a towel when all I did was go to hand you all my cards so you could check its validity?
What I can tell you is that nobody pulled you out of the house. Not me or any other investigator that was there. That didn't happen.
Okay. Then I'll just have to find some other way to figure out what happened to my shoulder. Okay. Let's see. What time did you all finally get to wrap up and leave my home and place of employment?
I don't know what time the search warrant ended. The service of the search warrant ended. I'm not sure what exact time.
Okay. Was it dark out? Was it light out?
I think it was dark when we were leaving.
Okay. Let's see. Were you proud of yourself for the job you did at my home and place of employment on the night of January 10th of this year? And did the other cops seem proud of the job they did too that night? Were you saying, "Good job, we took this horrible criminal off the street and people can sleep better at night now," or anything like that, like you would if you got, like a rapist?
I don't think I told anybody good job, and I don't think I said anything about taking a horrible criminal off the street.
Okay. That's a good answer. All right. And when I was sitting in Bob Peterson's patrol car after you guys had gotten the pizzas, one cop had come up and asked me if he could throw your pizza boxes in my trash can, and I said yeah, and he did. I'm just asking if you happen to know. I'm just asking because I'd really like to know who left the pizza boxes on the floor in my house, because there were a few of them left. There were 3 or 4 pizza boxes in my trash, which was fine, but there were some strewn on my floor, and I was just wondering if you knew who that may have been.
No, I don't.
Okay. I didn't figure you'd know. I just thought I'd ask just in case you went, "Oh yeah, these guys were packing up their boxes and this other group wasn't," or something. I don't know. I was just curious. And what were you guys watching on the TV at my place of employment?
I wasn't watching your TV at your place of employment. Are you talking about the business that was the business that was directly east of your residence?
Yeah, that's my place of employment.
Okay. I never went into that building.
Oh, okay. All right. So then I guess you wouldn't have any idea who stole the inventory off the shelves at my place of employment that night. Let's see here. You have any closing statements?
No.
Okay. Do you think my arrest took a criminal off the street?
I think that you were arrested because you violated the law.
Well, I was just wondering if you think it took a criminal off the street or not when I was arrested.
If you're considering a criminal as somebody who's violated the law, then that would be yeah.
Okay, because my idea of a criminal is, in April of 2010, I was walking home from the Quickie Mart up the street from my house. I had gone over there for milk or something. It was after dark. It was pretty cold out because I had on a parka. And I know April, it's usually kind of warm, but this was at night. I had on a parka. I had my pistol, the one that you all logged into evidence. I had it stuck in the waistband of my pants for the walk because I quite often carry that thing to protect myself. I went to the Quickie Mart. When I was in there, well, no, that was another time. That was when I stopped a robbery there. But I was coming back from the Quickie Mart, and as I was walking home, a man it was like a primer grade, it looked like an El Camino or a Ranchero, an old one from like maybe the late 60s, early 70s, pulled up next to me, opened his door, and tried to abduct me off of Country Club Road, right there, where I live, right off of Country Club Road. He tried to abduct me. It scared me to death. I ended up stopping him by reaching for my gun. He saw me reach for my gun, and that gun saved my life. I didn't even have to draw it. He drove away with his car door hanging open. And I was scared crazy. I was shaking so bad I went home and I called the police. Nobody ever showed up to take a report. I ended up going online. I filled out that thing online, that non-emergency form, and reported that abduction attempt. I never talked to a cop. A cop never came out. Nobody ever took a report. Then you fast forward to the night of my arrest. Some anonymous dingbat calls 88 Crime or 911 or whatever they called to report me, and to report the smell of marijuana and a medical marijuana card. And I had the Counter Narcotics Alliance. I pretty much had a SWAT team deployed to my house over that. And I'm wondering if that kind of sounds a little screwy to you. Because that guy that tried to abduct me, he was going to create a victim. I used to type police reports. I know when that happens quite often, they take you home and stick you in a cage with a dog collar on. One case I did that I transcribed, a man did that to a woman. He abducted her off the streets, and he had her in a dog cage with a collar. And what happened was that man's 13-year-old son left the cordless phone laying next to the cage on purpose when they left the house so she could call the police. And that's the only reason she lived. And so, guys do that. They see a woman walking, and sometimes they'll just try to snatch her off the street. That's creating a real victim, and it just seems to me the police would show up for that faster than they'd show up for the smell of marijuana, a harmless plant.
If you're asking me why there wasn't either about the police response or the lack of police response in reference to this report in 2010, I can't answer that simply because I don't know the details as far as who you called and how that call was or wasn't logged in. I don't have any of that information.
Well, it was years ago too. That was in 2010. But I kind of wondered about that, and the only thing that really came to my mind with that is because when a man abducts a woman off the street like that, the police, when they go and investigate that, there's generally no property seizure and forfeiture and selling it to pay for, further police activity. I think that's probably the reason why, like a real criminal with a real victim, why that kind of report would be ignored. But somebody who's got a medical marijuana card and they can smell marijuana, well, they're thinking marijuana, that's going to be a weed bust. A weed bust, we get to take all their property into seizure, and then they do this forfeiture thing, and they usually do that from other cases that I've talked to before. Other people that were in these cases, they've said that their stuff was sold before they even knew it. And that was why I was wondering, is it the property forfeiture, do you suppose, that might be driving them to send you all out for a report like that, but to ignore an abduction attempt?
Well, let me see if that's a question. It's kind of multifaceted, so let me see if I can answer your question again.
And just so you know, this doesn't have anything to do with the stuff we were talking about. I just figured since I have a cop here, I would just like to have that clarified just for my own, satisfaction.
In reference to that report that you're describing, that incident that you're describing in April of 2010, again, I don't know why there was a lack of police response in that specific incident. I don't have enough information to be able to answer that. I'm not the one who could answer that. However, if you're asking, does our response, does my response as a narcotic investigator to reports of criminal activity, is that like predicated or influenced by the potential for civil forfeiture in reference to that investigation? The answer to that is no. Our primary concern is the enforcement of criminal law and conducting criminal investigations. Now, obviously, as a narcotics investigator, while conducting criminal investigations, there is a civil aspect to those investigations in regard to civil forfeiture. And so after the initial criminal investigation is conducted, at times there are items that are identified as potentially subject to forfeiture due to the narcotics the forfeiture laws. And so that is very much a secondary thing. Our primary thing is enforcing criminal law. That comes secondary.
Okay.
So is it okay if I just clarify a couple of things for myself?
Yes.
So Detective, you talked a little, or answered a few questions about whether or not you received certification specifically in the area of the AMMA. Are you a certified police officer?
Yes.
How do you become a certified police officer?
I attend a training academy. First of all, you go through a hiring process with the Tucson Police Department, and then once you are hired, you attend a training academy. At this point, in this case, it was the Southern Arizona Law Enforcement Training Center. I attended a 16-week training academy there. After completing the courses and tests at that academy, I went on and I had field training with various different field training officers for a period of weeks. And there were evaluations during the course of that field training by those field training officers. And after the tests and evaluations during the academy, actually during a post-basic academy as well, which was Tucson Police Department specific training, and then after the evaluation and training that I was given during the course of that field training program, I was a certified police officer, and I went out and worked on my own in a patrol car.
Now, once you become a certified peace officer, do you have to receive a separate certification to, say, investigate narcotic crimes? Just, we're talking general, not anything. Let's pretend that there is no medical marijuana law, just hypothetically. Do you have to receive that separate certification?
No. Once you're a police officer, you work out, you go out into patrol, you conduct a variety of different kinds of investigations. In fact, that's how you grow and develop as an officer. You deal with the investigations run the gamut, and you deal with all kinds of investigations. You don't have to receive a specific certification in all these various different areas that you ultimately end up investigating.
Okay, so just to make sure I've got it clear in my head, once you become certified, you can investigate a robbery, and then the next hour or so investigate a narcotics offense, and the next hour investigate a traffic offense without needing separate certificates for each one.
That's correct.
Now,
I have a quick question.
absolutely.
Have you seen the PowerPoint presentation in the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act that was put out by Phoenix Police Department?
I don't think I have. No, I don't think I have. I've spoken, like I said, I've spoken with people with the Attorney General's office, Department of Health Services, and that law firm that represents the Department of Health Services in relation to policy from other agencies within the state. I don't think I've seen a PowerPoint put on by Phoenix Police.
Okay.
Now, you're also asked to answer some questions about general practices and practices of some of your colleagues when they're calling to check whether or not a card is valid. Can you give any opinion or give any details about the practices of anybody other than yourself? Specific people?
Correct. No. I mean, I know what I do, and I can tell you what I do. But again, people do things differently.
And like I said, I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer too. You know, it's not like a test, a pop quiz or anything.
And then I guess my last question, you mentioned that you are not tasked with enforcing certain parts of the health code. Would it be fair to say that the reason you don't do that is because a lot of the portions of Title 36 don't have any link to anything within either Title 28 or Title 13.
Yes.
That was a good question, Colleen.
I'm a lawyer.
All right.
All right, I think that's all I had to clarify. Did you have anything to clarify based on what I asked?
No, I think I've got it. I
Okay.
was just wanting to clarify about if you'd seen the PowerPoint, and that was about it.
All right. So, Detective Cheek, I'm going to give this recording to my secretary and see if she can have it transcribed by Monday.
Okay.
I'm hoping she will. If it might not be until Monday, but I will go ahead and email you a copy.
Okay.
If you have a chance to go ahead and review that and let us know if you see any inaccuracies, anything that was omitted, taken out of context, just so we can make sure it's accurate. And if at some point after we conclude this interview, if there's anything that comes to mind that you wish you had said, or you wish you'd have been asked, if you could let me know, just so we can set up a follow-up telephonic or something to let Ms. Huff know that information. But aside from that, time now is 11:59. We're going off tape.